Welcome everyone. We're here listening to Nissi, and it is Ekpott and not Epcot Center. I'm having difficulty in that. I'm thinking of Epcot Center.
You can say exports.
Right. And Nissi from BizConnect.Africa.com. So I think get straight into it. Introduce yourself. Why did you get intrigued with ourselves? Why did you want to get on board as a speaker? Who are you? What are you about? And what are you doing throughout Africa?
Thank you very much, Trevor, and good afternoon to everybody. A great privilege to be here. I've walked a journey with Jasper for quite a long time. So I generally get, I'm in the know of most of the things he does as a gig and as the Community Chamber of Commerce and all that. So it's a platform I believe has had a lot of potential for me as an individual, but I also believe has a very great future. So yeah, that's a summary. Today I want to talk about coast expansion. And I think in summary, basically, what I want to challenge us to do is to think out of the box. Everything we're already doing now, why are we not doing it across the entire Africa? Some of us are doing that already, but my intention is to reinforce and also help others who are not doing so already to think not just one country, but continent. I mean, it's a lot of stuff, but I'm going to squash it up into 20 minutes, and then there will be questions, and we can take it from there. So I think I'll start with telling my perspective of Africa. So running through 20 years of perspective in 2 minutes. So I became aware. I mean, I've always been an African. I was born in Nigeria. I grew up in Nigeria. I started a business when I was 15 years old. So I've always been an entrepreneur. I grew up in a family where my father was the CEO of a large company. So doing business has always been part of our culture. But I became aware of the future potential of the African continent somewhere around 1999. And then in the year 2000, I heard a gentleman named J. Gunnar Olsen. Back then, he was the president of the International Christian Chamber of Commerce. And he spoke in the year 2000 about it being Africa, an African era. But at that same year, The Economist magazine, which was the most popular magazine which is one of the most popular magazines in the world, actually did an editorial on Africa and captioned it the hopeless continent. So there was this collision of two friends of mine. Long story cut short, I joined Trade and Investment, trading across Africa in the year 2002. I moved to Johannesburg then and worked with a lady by the name of Jennifer. And we did business. I became aware of the potentials and the pitfalls. We did trade and investment in many African countries: Nigeria, Kenya, DRC, Congo, Brazzaville, Ghana, Zambia, all over the place. Somewhere around 2005, I partnered with a bunch of people and we formed what gave birth to BizConnect.Africa. And basically what we did was we partnered with an American lady called Laurie Elliott. And then we also partnered with a German guy by the name of Hartmut Sieper. So it was this cross-continental partnership. And we went around the world talking about Africa, just trying to sell the African continent. Now, to give context, Hartmut is a German banker who dodged the crisis of 2008 because he had moved his investments from somewhere around 2007, he had moved his investments from European stocks to African stocks in South Africa, Egypt, and Nigeria. So we campaigned in several global cities, and we heard all sorts of things. We heard comments like business and Africa cannot be in the same sentence. And I remember one fund manager we met in North Carolina who told me in his 25 to 30 years of managing funds, nobody had ever talked about, he had never heard about a business deal in Africa. Hearing these astounding things actually motivated us more. We got into writing books. doing programs. We hosted programs in key cities around the world and in Africa and in North America and Europe and all these places, and just talked about the opportunity of doing business in Africa. In this journey, a major inflection point on the African journey was 2007, when for the first time in the modern history of the continent, trade, that's international trade, went above 8 in volume. So before 2007, Africa used to receive more aid than trade. That changed in 2007. So that was encouraging for us. 2011, The Economist magazine came back and referred to the article they had done in 2001. And they apologized for that article, for calling Africa a hopeless continent. They did an assessment of all the sectors, or a range of sectors, and then I mean, it's not yet Uhuru. Africa is far, far, far from where it should be. But they changed and gave Africa a new label. They called the African countries lions on the rise. So that was quite a significant plus for us. Then in 2013, for the first time in its modern history, Africa actually crafted a development vision. And you know, when there is a vision, then the chances of getting somewhere, the chances of developing are higher. When there is no vision, people grope around in the dark. So in summary, my African perspective has been that over the last 20 years, with ebbs and flows, the continent has experienced steady growth. Now, what we do in this, our little pie in this whole thing has been that we have been a hub for facilitating intra-Africa trade and enterprise. For many years, we did a lot of facilitation offline, you know, behind the scenes. And then a couple of years ago, we set up, somewhere around 2016, we set up our websites. But because it's Africa, a majority of what we do still happens offline. But the last 3 months have been a trigger, you know, to do more. I liked what Scott said. He said, we don't have time to mess around anymore. Our convictions about the continent have been proven. And what we now desire to do is to help businesses fast track, you know, their Africa strategy, to develop a strategy to expand what they're doing to the rest of the continent. We have about 40 years of experience collectively in trade and investment. I mean, I have been in trade and investment at an international level for 20 years, and some of my partners have been in it for longer. I've worked with a lot of large corporates, you know, a lot of the big names, American companies coming to Africa. We have a section where we consult for their leaders and all that to help them understand business culture in Africa. And for South African companies going into the rest of the continent. And we've also worked for companies from other parts of sub-Saharan Africa coming to South Africa. But my passion lies with SMEs, because I mean, these big companies are good. They make a lot of, they stir the waters and make a lot of news, but the real transformation comes from SMEs. I also took away what Luther said about that it's time to transform by doing and stop the blame game. So that's what we're trying to do. We're registered in South Africa. We're a limited liability company, but we have offices and partners in several markets. And basically, I'm going to take the next 10 or 15 minutes just to share what we have done. You know, we have offices in 3 Nigerian cities. We have offices here in Cape Town, in Johannesburg. We also have operations outside of South Africa. I mean, out of Africa. We have an active operation in Canada. We have an active operation in the United States. And all this has happened. So we've been a sort of micro multinational just because we've been able to access the internet and we have telephone lines, which is one of the things Luther also pointed to in the previous session. So we've been able to manage, you know, sometimes we have hundreds of people working for us, and we've been able to do that from our offices in Johannesburg and in Cape Town and in other parts of Africa because of technology. So I want to share a few of these tips to help us to gain direction for those who want to tap into that market. So the question is, why Africa? And I'm going to run through a lot of statistics here, but I'm doing this deliberately because typically we receive so much negative information that it's always good to remind us and to reaffirm the potentials while not denying the problems. So the African economy is about $2.9 to $3 trillion in size. So it's the same size as India in terms of economic size. There are 400 African unicorns. A unicorn is a company whose value is over $1 billion. So there are 400 of such companies in Africa. So that alone is a huge market. Then there are 1 billion people. Some statistics say 1.3 billion, but you know, African statistics, you always have to discount it a little. The middle class is about 300 million people. The sub-middle class is about 200 million people. The African middle class has tripled in 30 years. Apart from China, no other country has experienced such growth. You know, the consumer spending in Africa was $470 billion in the year 2000, when we were called the hopeless continent. In 2016, it was $1.1 trillion. So there is $1.1 trillion for the taking. It has tripled in that span of time, and is expected to triple again in another 10 years. Polls suggest that Africa has the highest number of enterprises, and that I can say from experience. I mean, I've not seen any other place where there are so many enterprises, but the problem is a lot of them are informal and need to be structured and mentored. And in the last 10 years, 6 of the world's fastest growing countries are in Africa. You know, so in 2018, while the GDP of the world grew at 2.6%, Africa grew at double that, at about 5%. So the continent of Africa has collectively experienced 25 years of economic growth. So it has the second highest growth as a region globally. Then other opportunities, why should you be in Africa? 40% of the world's biodiversity is in Africa, 60% of its uncultivated arable land. So with 7 billion people and growing, the world needs water and food. So it cannot ignore Africa. You know, I listened to the African Development Bank saying the agro business in the continent right now is close to $1 trillion in value. Then foreign investments and remittances from abroad comes close to about $100 billion a year. And then, of course, there is the issues of democracy. You know, last year, 2019, there were 20-something elections on the African continent. This is very significant because 30 years ago, there were not even up to 20 democracies in the entire continent. So despite the troubles, there's been a lot of progress. So at the current growth rate, it is projected that by 2050, Africa will be double the GDP of Japan, where Japan is today. So just think about that rate of growth. If we can harness the continent, if we can move out of our boundaries and harness the entire continent, that also means our businesses have that potential to grow as the continent is growing. This is not rocket science because it has happened in Europe, it has happened in America, it has happened in China just in the last few years. And you know, I was listening to Ali Jack Ma, the Chinese billionaire. He has retired and he's now doing business all across Africa. And he says Africa is not where China was 40 years ago. He says Africa is where China was 15 years ago. That's very significant. So what are the key triggers? The things that have triggered the growth in the continent is, number one, one of the key triggers is telecoms. So let me give you an example. In 1999, there were more telephone lines in the city of New York than in the entire African continent. There were less than 20 million telephone lines in the whole of Africa. By fast track to 2019, there are 750 million telephone lines on the African continent. North America has about 400 million telephone lines. In the year 2010, there were less than 15 million internet users in the entire Africa. In December 2019, there were more people connected to the internet in Africa than in the entire North America. There were 400 and something million people on the internet in Africa. Of course, not at the same volumes and at the same cost, but it tells you that you can now speak to 400 million people from your room. It's a huge potential. So because of ability to communicate, the number of wars have gone down from over 20 in 1996 to probably just a handful, pockets and skirmishes and all that, still too many. There's been improving trade and connectivity. And then the vision, the 50-year vision is called the Vision 2063. It's another trigger. It was crafted and signed by all the countries in 2013. It's a big thing because when there is a vision, it might not be perfect, but once there is a vision, people have something to benchmark. And it is significant that in the last 400 years, this is the first time the African continent has a vision. That vision establishes things, space stations, business, stuff like that. And then the biggest thing, which I want to emphasize on today, is the free trade area. The free trade area is 54 countries coming together to form a single trade bloc and remove all the tariffs. So it makes it easier for somebody to serve the entire continent with its products. It's a powerful opportunity. It aims to triple trade growth and harness this 1.3 billion people into one market, cut red tape and all that. So the potential, I've gone through that to say the potential is huge, you know. But the question then is, can you access the markets? I mean, if you've got a telephone and an internet, there's no reason why you should not be able to access any part of Africa. However, going international is usually challenging. It's filled with intense issues. You know, you turn on the news and your heart fails. Now, big companies have the multi-million-dollar budgets to access these markets. And before the era of the internet, they had monopoly over those markets because SMEs have funding challenges, but that has changed. So the challenge now is, how do SMEs take advantage of the African opportunity, all that has been described? And the last part of my presentation is saying it starts with developing an Africa strategy. So I just want to look at 4 key parts. We have a whole methodology called Going Global on a Dime that helps companies go through this whole process. But I want to just take 4 key parts of this methodology and say every business should look at the African market. You should be doing what you're doing, not just for your local markets, but for the entire 1 billion people on the continent. So the first aspect of the methodology is usually challenging the perspectives. You have to have the right perspective. The biggest problem with Africa is perspective. I mean, I am an African. I've been to many African countries on the ground. What we read on the news, I can tell you anytime, is far from what is happening. If you turn on the news, I'm a Nigerian. If you turn on the news on Nigeria, you'll read about Boko Haram. But you wouldn't know that the city that I come from is one of the fastest growing cities on the continent. It's building skyscrapers. The country is having its biggest infrastructural boom in 50 years since independence. It's building speed trains, roads, ports, airports, everything. It's just building so many things at the same time. So people are not taking advantage of things because the perspective of news has turned them off. So to assess Africa, we need to change perspective. Then the next thing as part of perspective, changing perspective, is to identify your unique products, build a long-term view. To do business in Africa is very challenging. So you have to have a long-term view. It's not something where you expect to break even in a few months or something. And then social responsibility, which refers back to what Luther has said about getting involved to transform. A mentality of social responsibility is good. A habit of collaboration is very good also. And then very importantly is to gain business culture training. The second stage is to prepare. So to prepare is now to identify, do you know the opportunities available? How do you get ready for these opportunities? Gather the required information, have a better view, talk to trade associations, agencies, trade desks in embassies, go online, you know, and find out the on-the-ground information. The third thing then is to get prepared at an organizational level, whether it's a big business or a small business. There are key things that need to be done, such as the right technologies, profiles, websites, marketing strategies, social media, online presence, and all those kind of tools. to do the right regulatory, understand the regulatory requirements where required and get them in place, the right logistics, get them in place, get in place the financial infrastructure. What I mean by financial infrastructure is business is about creating wealth. How does the money get to you safely? How do you deliver your product and your payments or your monies get back to you safely? And then the right partnerships and other things that have to do with building an organization. And the third thing then is to build your business model. And we encourage people to start from a niche and then expand outwards. Then develop a business plan that has to do with dealing with the key aspects, you know, the products, who will buy them, channels, partnerships, the key people, etc. Everything in the business plan, but kind of Africa expansion focused business plan. And then the next step would be to, in terms of building the business model, would be to establish the right mechanisms and then implement. And then the last thing I need to talk about, because you can't talk about Africa without talking about the pitfalls, is that there's a lot of pitfalls in Africa. So I'm not trying to present a pie in the sky mentality. There's a lot of inefficiency, lack of accurate information, a lot of corruption, still a lot, bureaucratic bottlenecks, very high operational cost, logistics issues, trucking that takes hours in some parts of the world can take days and weeks in Africa, financial fraud, and then of course, pockets of instability. And the biggest of all that scares people is cultural shock. So how do you deal with this? You need to have a pitfall strategy. Every single one of these things are things that we have dealt with. And there is a strategy to be able to deal with all these things and be able to overcome them and expand the business depending on the sector of your business. You know, easier for businesses that don't have to go out there to send their products in the markets, harder for businesses that need a presence in other markets. And then I like recommending what we call the tour group model. You know how a tour group is? People come from different places and then get onto one bus and become one tour group. And then they go into the safari or something together. They might not have known themselves before, but because of that group, it becomes possible for them to do what they want to do. So that's a model people can use to be able to go into Africa, share costs, share the risk, share the experience, and also the fun. So usually our strategic role is to help people develop an African market, an African strategy, to be able to access the African markets and to be able to help people push down the barriers that restrict them to a small market and open them up to the potential to grow with the continent. So it's 23 minutes and there is so much to say when it comes to dealing with Africa, but I hope that in these 23 minutes, we've been able to at least stir up some thinking, you know, unlock something, make the listeners consider wanting to explore and talk more about Africa, find out more about Africa. And I hope we've been able, or I have been able to achieve this in this time. So yeah, I can take questions and suggestions and other stuff.
I've just got to say, Nissi, I mean, this platform is an absolute blessing in that we've been able to find each other. So that's what's so exciting. And then all of the exhibitors that are on here and the connections that you have. I mean, you mentioned to me early on in our communications a week or two ago that you were widely connected and you dropped a number. How big is your network?
Well, I am by how do you call it? By how I'm wired. I'm actually a networker. So I used to head a trade and investment organization, and we established in 30-something African countries, and I co-established across the world. We launched. I was involved in launching in 5 American cities, in Toronto, in Belgium, Spain, France, and then across the continent. So we have quite a significant network, which helps us to be able to, if you look on our website, you see we talk about verifiable opportunities. So Africa is still where China was 15, 20 years ago. You couldn't go to Alibaba and buy anything. You could lose your money or you could not get what you wanted. But today you can go to Alipay and order a thing and it comes to you. So through this, so why I'm saying that is these networks we have help us to verify at a grassroots level. So we can comfortably reach over 30 countries at the moment, even though we're stronger in some countries than others.
Okay, and I know you've got some really good numbers to be able to share with us. But before I drill down deeper into you and get some more information out of you, is there anyone else on the panel or that's here on the forum who would like to ask Nissi questions? I'm looking out for anyone that opens their mic or puts their hand up if you've started recording. So I'm looking around. Who's there? No? Okay. Just shout if you want to get on board. Nissi, you know what? In the good tradition of Scott Kundell, who turned around and said, let's not stuff around. And it's not like me. I'm the gentle person in this entire network. I would never do this. But where's the money? So I want to find out on behalf of every entrepreneur that comes on board and wants to trade in Africa is, where are the big opportunities? We talk of, hey, Nissi, what's on your wish list? Who do you want to connect with? Who do you want to find? Where are the opportunities to be unleashed? And how can we open them up? So just share for someone who's sharp on this forum where the big play is that they can get involved in straight away with you.
You know, because the continent of Africa is developing, the opportunity, it's hard to narrow in. You know, one of our businesses is we're doing a project in a city in an African country. So we use the internet. So we have meetings, board meetings every week and stuff like that. And in that city, the tilers in this day and age don't use tile spacers. They don't know how to use tile spacers. So if you were a tiler and you went to tile in that city, you'd be ahead of the markets before you even started. So I mean, it's the opportunities in Africa are endless. It's hard to narrow down, but I usually encourage people to start in the trade hubs, in the big hubs at a country level. And then in terms of sectors, you know, to identify the sectors that have the least entry barriers. I mean, so property development, you know, training and education is huge. Agriculture, I mean, I could go on and on. Mining, you know, some of the countries are just developing their mining sectors charter. Then if you've got a product that you can, the lowest hanging fruits, if you've got a product that you can deliver online, remotely, then you should be in business on the African continent. I mean, so a platform like this should go across the continent. Everybody should be able to be part of virtual trade fair from Cairo to Cape Town. And the markets should be sold to the entire continent.
So I'm intrigued. I mean, you picked us up. How did you pick us up? Were you out on social media looking around for an opportunity? Just tell us how you got involved in virtual trade fair.africa. And when you talk about this should go across the whole of Africa, well, who's the organization that is going to take virtual trade fair.africa across the whole of Africa?
Okay, so that's two questions. The answer to the first question is that I'm a member of GIG. So virtual trade fair came from the GIG network. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Then the second answer is, the answer to the second question is at two levels. The first level is purely your advertising strategy. So if you're doing a social media campaign on LinkedIn or on you know, Facebook or something, you could target your campaign at Cape Town, you could target it at South Africa, or you could target it at 5 African countries or more. So at that level, you would then be able to get interest. So it's just a shift in the frame of mind. If you're training, for example, like I have a partner who is doing agriculture-based training. what we've helped to encourage them to do is to put the training online and target the whole continent. So we're saying, why do you target a market of 50 million when you have a market of 1 billion people sitting? So that's the one level. Then at the second level, there is then the on-the-ground stuff where you can find partners in strategic markets to develop those markets. So you could start with the regions and then narrow down to countries and cities.
Right. So I suppose what I'm getting at here is, how about co-branding? I have a look at your logo and I have a look at our logo. None of us saw each other in putting together logos here. But how would it be for an organization like Trade.africa.com to actually co-brand and have Trade.africa.com as its own derivatives, so that we co-brand and we have a relationship? That's how I think all of us should be trying to work out, how do we expand across Africa? Because this is not just about Africa. I want the master of networking globally, Mark Jarrett, to come on board and say, what would you do from the UK to make this connection happen, Mark Jarrett? You are the specialist here. Talk to us.
Yeah, so Trevor, I think you've said something very important. I mean, I'm always happy to collaborate. You know, I mean, if our goals and our visions align, and if we talk, I'm always willing to collaborate. So we can talk about that. And then the second point about not just Africa. In fact, I think post-COVID, it's a question of perception. The African continent has has a strategic advantage, in the sense that, and I'm not saying this in a negative way, and I'm not wishing the rest of the world bad, but because we have some of the lowest incomes, combining that with development in telecoms, we could create an astounding amount of jobs, ICT-based supports, virtual jobs in Africa. A lot of our countries speak English. Well, some speak French, but most of the French-speaking countries speak English as a second language. So the potential is huge, you know, for us to be able to leapfrog infrastructure and jump into the internet and deliver products and services across not just Africa, but the entire world. I believe that Africa will need to come to a time, not just where we develop ourselves, but where we also pull our weights on global affairs.
And I was hoping to get Mark Jarrett from the UK to actually come in and comment and say, okay, how can he bring together from the UK connections for us all around the globe and make things happen just out of this relationship? But I do know Chris Black. He goes up and down all over the place in Africa. Chris, if you're with us and not having your lunch in the background there, are you willing to make a comment on what you hear in here? And do I presume you know Nissi? You've come across him through the gig operation. Perhaps share your inputs on what you've heard here.
Yeah, thanks, Trevor. Yeah, I certainly have come across Nissi, and Nissi and I have had one or two chats. And it is certainly a wide open market. You know, we've been dealing in or working in Africa, generally above the equator now for the last about 12, 14 years in terms of business development up there. And it's been a good ride. You know, we are very, very well accepted, and people really say, well, wow, you know, it's really good to have quality products and quality services and that type of thing. And you know, just to give you a quick story of how it you know, what it's looking like. So we're working with a partner in Tunis, in Tunisia. And this guy, so, you know, we run startup training programs. This guy has got a goal to double the amount of programs he runs every year, reaching across 4 nations up there. So you're reaching across Algeria, Libya, Egypt, and Tunisia. And he really has got the bit between the teeth and is really wanting to promote people to get into their own small businesses right across that northern range. And so, yeah, it's been very good. And the more collaborating we can do, and the more networking that we can do, and the more we can work together, the more we can work on a common purpose and have reach all of our goals, really. And that's to get people active economically on the African continent. So, yeah, it's Nissi. Thank you very much for your perspective. So that's my comment, Trevor.
That's great. Thank you, Chris. And you just stimulated a thought as I was listening to you there. People need to be in touch with each other. Please put your details down in the chat facility down below, especially if you want to connect with Nissi and start spreading your wings across the African continent, because we certainly do. And we certainly want to work with the quality of entrepreneurs that we're meeting on this platform. I tell you what, Nissi, I do want to introduce you to one of our most exciting entrepreneurs here in our chamber, someone I met who was a security guard just a couple of years ago, and decided that wasn't where he was going to stay. He was going to build a security company. And I'm just thinking right now that company should be going all across Africa. So Patson, I hope you come on board and turn around and say, listen, are you ready for global expansion? And perhaps we've got to be asking Nissi, is there room for security companies? So Patson, just introduce yourself to Nissi if you've never met before.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Nissi. It was great hearing from you. My name is Patson Zodidzi. I'm running a security company. We're specializing in guarding and protection services, which is for home needs and business environment. I started this company in 2013. And yeah, the idea came about while I was a security guard, just at the gate, opening up the gate, this and that. And yeah, through all that experience which I gained from that, yeah, I began to start my own company.
Yeah, very good to meet you, Patson. I'm sure we will. Hello.
Yes.
Are you hearing me? Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm sure we will get to talk further. Just like I said to Trevor initially, there is an opportunity. It starts with the thinking, but there is an opportunity for expansion into every part of Africa. I mean, there is. So having lived in South Africa and, you know, with the security issues and seeing how security companies have reacted, even in our own business, we've taken a lot of knowledge and gadgets and stuff and set them up. In fact, let me tell you one story. We had a robbery incident in our office, one of our offices a few months ago, or I mean, a few years ago, a year ago or so. And well, thank God nobody was hurt, but it was very bad, very scary. And basically what we did was we just spoke to the community, and we helped them set up a local security outfit. And that's not my area of expertise, but just helping point them to the things or the kind of services I enjoy from the security service that guards the complex where I live in, like your kind of company. So I thought to myself and I said, wow, what if we had some of these guard service providers who would work with some of those companies? Now, again, linking into technology, you see, in the past, you would have had to fly to Ghana to set up a company. Today, with telecoms, you can get a partner in Ghana, you can train them, you can set them up, you can look at what they do. I mean, I visit the sites where we're building because one of our ventures, we have several ventures we manage. One of it is a building company. I visit the sites on the phone. I have meetings and people, we do live chats like this. You can train them, you can send them material, training guides, stuff like that. You can supply them equipment. So if you ever have to visit, because it's good to visit, you're just going there to certify, to oversee, you know, and you can do this in 54 countries, or well, as many as, and you know, the security situation on the continent of Africa is so behind that almost everywhere the service is needed. But the question is having a model that it's like opening a franchise. It takes you 10 years to build the first one, and then the next 10 years you go from 1 to 200. So that's the kind of thinking that we really, it's part of our goal is to really challenge, you know, the different businesses, cooperative societies, enterprises, groups, NGOs, etc., to think that way.
Okay. No, that's great. I mean, that's great. That's a good idea. Obviously, currently we are operating only in Gauteng, and with a vision, obviously, with some deals, obviously that are in the pot already, in going out to different provinces. And yes, obviously, wherever there is an opportunity, and quite a lot of things, even the security guards, we can manage them online and the like. So with the help of all that technology, something can happen, yes.
What I'd like you to do is connect with Nissi and see if there's something that can happen there big time. But I'd also like, if there's anyone else that really wants to jump on, you better get your hand up now or turn around and say you want to get there. I'd like to, if no one steps up, I'd like Trevor Kettler just to, just from your perspective, take in what you do as a program all throughout Africa. How does this communication with Nissi, do you see the potential between someone like yourself and Nissi and taking your content throughout Africa?
No, Trevor, I think it's very valuable. I mean, I've done quite a lot of work in Africa, but the problem is, and I think Nissi aligned to it, is that one has to have a contact there. And you can only sort of get into a country if you have a contact. Some countries that I've been trying to get into, you have to open up a business. So again, I think it all depends what field you're in. In my field, I don't want to open up a business there. I just want to get in and get out. But I think with social media, it's changed the platform. It's changed everything now. Yeah. So not only, I mean, I've physically been to Africa and through Africa, quite a few countries, a number of times, as far as Egypt. Well, you can't get any north of that, can you? And so there's plenty of business out there, but one has to have the contacts. And I think connecting with Nissi is quite valuable because he alone is the contact and he's got his contacts. So I think is a valuable source to hook up with, and which I certainly would like to do.
Great. I believe Chris had his hand up. Yes, he's got his hand up there. I didn't see you, Chris. Sorry.
Yeah, I'd fully agree with that. Thanks, Trevor. I'd fully agree with what Trevor said, as well as what Nissi said. Firstly, you do have to have contacts. It's incredibly important. We will not go into a nation unless we're invited. We will not go in unless we've built a solid partnership to begin with. And that's the first thing. And secondly, if you're not thinking about going to do your training online or something like that, you know, it's going to speed up the process hugely. And so we've gone that route, and we've done as much as we can. In fact, we've gone almost totally online now. So even the guys in Tunis, you know, they are running the programs virtually now. And so we don't let something like COVID-19 stop us. But I must say, having said that, you know, one of the greatest challenges in Africa, especially working with the more poorer parts of the community, is the access to the internet and the actual technology that they've got is very poor. And so it becomes a challenge to train those that are, you know, don't have, who are more in the poorer communities. Having said that, however, you know, one shouldn't let these things stop you. One should actually say, right, how can we get around it? And how can we, I mean, it doesn't even have to be Africa. I can tell you right now, I'm training a program virtually right now where the people are in Cape Town, in the townships in Cape Town, and in the whole White River, Masoi area. And we've had to provide them with tablets so that they could actually do the training online. Because, to do it through a cell phone, yeah, you can, but it's a real challenge. We've actually gone that route to make it as simple as possible for people to join. But at the same time, sometimes you've got to give people a helping hand. And the success of online training is directly dependent upon the strength of the internet connection where they are. But Patson, yeah, certainly, one can train online. We've been doing it. And so, so that's my contribution anyway.
I see Dawn has something she wants to say. Can I make a comment here? Then Dawn can talk. Okay, so I really like what Trevor said, and I see that you're already ahead in doing business in Africa. Yes, some businesses need boots on the ground, some don't. Now, business has protocol and culture. So one of the things we do with the big companies is we sit down with their leaders and we do sessions. So if Walmart is opening a business in Africa, then they come to us and they say, okay, sit down with the managers who send them and train them on how to do business in Africa. The protocols are different from doing business in America. So yes, and one of the protocols we always tell people is you have to have partners. So we guide on how to find verifiable partners. And then to the point that Chris made, yes, you always have to, it's that concept of doing business to transform. So we've worked in rural communities where there was no internet, absolutely. And we've trained builders from kids in the bush, literally. And we train them. In fact, some of those kids are now the best builders in the city. And we find a way. One of the things we've done is we have business hubs. So we create a hub, we put Wi-Fi, the wireless, and then they come there and they do work. So there's always a way. Now you have to have a long-term mentality to be able to recoup. So over the years, after 3-4 years, we've recouped our investment. But if we went in with a 3-month mentality, you wouldn't recoup because you had to build the infrastructure in a sense. So there's always ways to work around these things once you understand the protocols and the challenges. So yeah, sorry, go ahead, Dawn.
Thank you, Nissi. Thanks a lot. Yeah, I'm very excited to connect with you and maybe Chris as well, because not only are we in the retail and exhibition space, we have water filtration products. We are the agents for AccuTab in Africa, and we've got great products that will transform your really dirty water, take all the bacteria out to make it safe for drinking. We've got filters, we've got tablets that can go into JoJo tanks or into small bottles that will make the water safe for drinking. And we'd love to have the platform to get into Africa with this product. It's a really inexpensive product, and it's a really vital for health, because people are drinking really contaminated water, and these tablets will purify that water safe for drinking.
Yeah. Thanks, Dawn. I'm actually particularly interested in talking to you because one of the projects, if you look behind me, you'll see that house. Not sure you can see it. There it is. So that's a picture of a property development we're doing in Nigeria. And we've done a first phase and we're doing a second phase. And one of our key needs is water purification. So right now they have these boreholes, and people used to drink from the boreholes, and then they found out that the water was not, the water table is high, so they don't dig very far. They find water, and that water is contaminated by sewage and all kinds of stuff. So people stopped drinking the water, but then now they have to buy water. But there is no verification that the water they buy does not come from another borehole down the road.
Exactly.
So there is room for affordable water treatment solutions. Now, I'm sure I'm not an expert in the industry, but what we found, I went to a company in Taiwan to look at their models and stuff like that for this estate. But what we found is that, now this is where the East tends to beat the West. So the West has big systems, and those big systems are too big for African communities. But the East, because they were just where we are 30 years ago, know how to bring down the units to a small module that people can add up to. So what we found is that if we had water purification models that you could start from a home to an estate or a complex to a city that take into consideration the income levels of the people, then you have a winner. People always watch out for their health. So if it's health positive, if it's good for the health, you don't find it difficult to sell. Nobody wants to die. So yeah, so
exactly. Nissi, because we've got like a strip of tablets like this. There are 10 tablets. One little tablet in a certain solution of water, you will kill all the bacteria and it's safe for drinking. And that strip of tablets, 10 tablets, cost 10 Rand. So it's really inexpensive. So we've got that little tablet to bigger tablets that go into JoJo tanks or into water tankers that actually, and various other filters. So they're great products and they're saving lives, basically.
So in our estates, if I may add, because of the backlog in infrastructure, the government doesn't have pipe-borne water in 3/4 of the city. So we actually become our own water, Cape Town water, Joburg water, whatever water. So we have our own boreholes, our own tank systems, our own distribution systems. That comes standard. So things like this are quite, and it's all over the countries, a lot of the countries, it's everywhere. There is thousands or tens of thousands of boreholes. So there's all these opportunities, all over the place that one can get.
So Lee, we take 50% for every introduction that comes out of this forum. I mean, that sounds like an exciting collaboration that you can get into there. Nissi, I'm going to ask you the question as we come into close off here, and we're all going to take a break before the next session. What surprised you about this platform, or let's put it more positively, what has pleasantly surprised you about this platform since you came on board?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm surprised. I have been involved with Jasper and the gig community for quite a long time. Jasper knows that he's my wealth coach and mentor. So I always give him a call anytime I want to do stuff. So I've always expected it's going to be a platform where I'm going to learn a lot and where people are going to connect. And it's met my expectation, So yeah, so I think it's good. I think it's a good platform. I think it's what we're expecting. I think my expectation has been made. And I think it has a very big future. I once did consulting for one of I can't mention the name now, but it's one of the biggest financial institutions in South Africa. And one of the parts of the consulting we did had to do with digging into its history. And I found out that its history was exactly, in fact, as I was doing that consulting, I was remembering Jasper. As I was digging into the history, I was the one who had to dig the history. And the trajectory is almost exactly the same. How that institution started, how they mobilized a group of people, and how they kept growing in leaps and bounds until a time came where they were one of the biggest companies in the Southern Hemisphere. So being on this platform today and for the next 4 days, I see that trajectory.
Well, I think that's a fantastic pat on the back for Jasper, and I absolutely concur. The vision that has come from Jasper also helped pull this whole thing together with all the other moves and shakers here. So Nissi, I want to say thank you very much, and thank you again.
Yep. One more comment in closing, if you don't mind. I want to say one last thing, and I want to leave you with this, that expanding into Africa is also a means of survival, because the rest of the world is going to expand into this market. Just as we're doing this now, the rest of the world is also strategizing and saying, how do we take South Africa? So it might be a means of survival to also think of how to grow your markets, or else you will find giant corporations squeezing your industry to death. Thank you.
And I absolutely concur. And here's the platform to do something, that's for sure. Dawn is excited because, and I'll tell you why Dawn is excited. When this was mentioned as a potential project, we went out to have a look, who else is doing this? And we couldn't find anybody. And the moment that we actually put it up onto social media, people started finding us. Now that's exciting, but don't tell anyone. We grow in this and we're reaching across Africa. Nissi, I want to say thank you very much for introducing yourself to us. This is not the last that we're going to be connecting. That's for certain. Fantastic insight. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Trevor.